Hey guys, welcome back and Happy New Year! It's been a while since I uploaded a video which wasn't ArchiDiaries, but don't worry, I'm still going to be documenting my design work for this half of the year too. If you haven't checked out those videos yet, I'll link the complete playlist below. This is a video that I've been trying to make for a very long time, but never found the courage to sit down and unpack. I think it's because I want to deliver as much information and help as possible, but I also recognize that not everyone is going to be able to grasp my entire Notion workflow from a single video. In this video, I'm going to give you a tour of my Notion workspace for university, explain how I've tweaked it in the past year, and tell you why you should be using this program to consolidate your ideas and notes. I honestly have to give credit to Notion for not just helping me stay organized, but for making my life easier. I think many of us struggle with keeping things easily accessible and being able to plan in depth, and Notion lets you do all of these things. In my opinion, there aren't really any alternatives to Notion. There are more efficient and streamlined, so I truly think it's such a powerful tool that not many students know about. Notion is an all-in-one workspace tool which is customizable, free, and has new features releasing all the time. Before I begin, let me show you some of the basics first so it's easier to understand. So here I've got a blank page. Now, Notion works in this system where you've kind of got pages and blocks, which I'll try and explain simultaneously. So you generally have a sidebar like this, and these are all of my pages. Of course, you can have pages within pages too. So I've created a sort of main page by clicking on this add a page button at the side. I usually keep my sidebar closed because I normally work on one page at a time while I'm doing a certain task. So I can give this page a title, let's just name it Architecture School Dashboard for now. And as you can see here below, you can kind of import any kind of database, but also templates and things like that. Notion has their own set of templates. You'll also find that a lot of creators, including me, create their own templates for different purposes, and you can get started by making this just an empty page. So if I just hit enter, it will create an empty page for me, and of course I can go ahead and write something. So let's write thesis design, and as I'm writing these, you'll see that each word on a separate line is a separate block. So I can kind of like drag this around. I can do all sorts of things with it. If you click on the 6 dots next to it, it will open up this menu where you can kind of like adjust or sort of tweak it however you want. You can turn this into different kinds of headings if you're writing a bunch of text. You can turn it into a page. So like I mentioned, a page within a page. You can also turn it into a to-do list. I use this one very often. Bullet points, numbered lists, toggles are really useful as well, and other things which aren't necessarily important for this example yet, but we'll move on. So the next thing is the sidebar. So again, like I said, these are my main pages, and these all have different pages within them. I've used this more of as a sort of like navigation sidebar, as you would have your bookmarks, for example. And so whenever I'm working in Notion, I'll usually be working in one single page at a time. And then if I really need to, I'll switch. But I think that way it just works best, and you're not like always trying to navigate to certain places all the time. And the way you structure your Notion is completely dependent on you, because you don't really have to stick to a certain structure that someone else does. It's really more about just letting yourself kind of build and play along. Another great feature is the / command, which shows up every time you kind of like try to write a block. So if I hit / you can see I've actually got access to Notion AI, which is really cool. But the basic blocks, which I showed you previously, are text, page, table, bullet points, quotes, dividers, links to other pages, and things like that. And then you can also make databases. So databases are basically, I think, the kind of like key feature of Notion, which is kind of difficult to wrap your head around, but you can almost think of it as an Excel sheet on steroids. And I mean that in the best way possible, because databases are really, really useful when you have to kind of consolidate a lot of information together. So I'm just going to go ahead and make one. So I can make a database inline, which means in this page, or I can make it its own separate page. And I think once you play around with Notion, you'll understand why you might want to do one or the other. Of course, every inline database can also be turned into a full page if you click this arrow icon. So you'd want to name your table first. Let's just name it portfolio for now. And each database will have a name column, which is default, you can't delete that. And then you can have different properties. So this one, for example, is tags. And the type of sort of property this is a multi-select. So you can turn this into text, number, select, which is just one option, multi-select, which is good for other like keywords or, you know, multiple options. The status, date, person, if you're using or sharing Notion workspaces, files and media. I really don't use this one much often. Checkbox is a great one, especially if you've got like different tasks that you just want to visually see which ones you've completed. And it also helps when you're creating stuff like a task box database and you just want to like tick off whichever task you've completed. And then each table can also have various views. So if you click on this plus arrow, it can turn from a table to something like a gallery. And so each kind of like input or each block in your table turns into this gallery view, which is really nice as well. So you can switch from different views. You can use different views for different purposes as well. You don't need to be a master of Notion to know how to use it either. I mean, there are still features in here that I don't really know how to use, but that's okay because Notion's working at its best for me the way it is now. So let's jump into my pages. I'll give you a tour of my space. So this is my architecture school uni dashboard, and I've basically been tweaking this over the past year and a half almost. I do have a template like this, but it's a bit more complicated and it has a bit more features within it. This is what works for me right now, but you also have to bear in mind that I only have 2 modules at the moment this year. So this whole setup is catered towards what I like to use it for and what my needs are. So the first page is my portfolio, and this is something that I've been recently working on, and it's honestly the simplest database you can think of. I've got my page title, the status, which is an automatic property from Notion, any notes, and I've added that as a text property, and then a checkbox. So if I open up these toggles, which are actually now called subtasks. So this essentially is one task, and then now you're able to do subtasks by going over to the 3 dots on the side, going down to sub items, and then basically you just create a new task and you name it. And what I've done is broken down my portfolio into 3 sections, named each page, and then I've basically just been going through this and tweaking whatever needs to be tweaked. So right now I'm kind of at section 3 where I've done the first 2 components. The third one is still in progress and I need to start the rest. And then I've given myself other like comments or things that I need to remember in relation to this portfolio. So it's just a very simple page, but this tracker honestly helps you kind of like visualize your portfolio in a very organized manner. And you can always kind of like go ahead and switch things about if you need to, because I find that especially over the holiday period, when you don't have that consistent loop of feedback from your tutors, you can get lost and you can get stuck, and you can end up in a place where you honestly don't even know what to do next. So this really helped me so far to kind of like understand what I need to do and what pace I should be working at. And now with about a week left, I've got maybe like 4 or 5 different pages to complete, and that's my portfolio done. And now I've got 2 different databases. So on the left here is my references, which is basically all the like web pages or books or articles that I found related to the research that I've done. And I've said this previously that research is really key, and Notion can honestly help you consolidate all that information in a really clever way. If you're using Chrome, I would definitely suggest downloading the Notion web clipper, and basically what that does is allows you to clip any website ever on the internet into one of your databases, and then what you can do is basically go in, these become their own pages, opens up on the side, and if you've got kind of like a web page where it's from a news article, it will often copy in all that information so that you don't necessarily have to like save it in your bookmarks and never look at it again. And sometimes I've also, I think, added notes to some of these as well. I'm not sure which ones, but yeah, it just kind of like really helps you. So all these kind of like sentences that are in bold, I've done, and it just helps me kind of like go back and reference and see what my research was. So this is great, especially at the beginning of any kind of project. And then you can contrast this with your with another database that I have, which is the tutorials database. And now this is where I'm inputting the information. And each week for each tutorial, I've kind of like named each week. And I also use this system when I'm creating my presentation packs, when I'm exporting PDFs and pages for that week. And when I'm like naming stuff throughout that week as well, it will be like exploring the brief X1 or whatever. So if I go into a random one like this, Garden City, I basically wrote down the feedback that I got. So this is taken from my notes in my sketchbook, added in any like images or references, and then references that my tutor gave me, and a very, very simple like task list. Usually I will go in and kind of like recolor these as green. You can do that really simply by clicking on the block, going to color, going down here and clicking green background, so you kind of like know what you're doing, and again it helps you stay on task. A way in which these two databases work together is I've added a comment here saying, look at these sketches and elements in terms of the concept, and I researched John Haydock's kind of like work and projects, and I added it into my references database. So this is it, a growing incremental place. If I go in here, let's see if it will show. Yeah, so it does have all of that kind of like text and images from that particular website. And so what I've done is basically linked that as a page. So you can do this really simply by going / link to a page, and then you search for that page, so a growing incremental place, add that in and it'll link it. So you don't actually have to like go back and find where that was, in which database, etc. And Notion's search feature is also great. I believe it's Control P, and you can search absolutely anything. So if I search something like paradise, it will show up like paradise as a garden, paradise and carpets, stuff like that. So I think, you know, it's very difficult to kind of like lose information in Notion, if that makes sense. And then finally at the end of this page, I've also got another toggle, which is open for inspiration. I think like sometimes when I'm feeling quite stuck on what to do next, or I don't know how to put a page together, or I don't know what kind of style I want to do, I'll open up this toggle, and it's a very simple gallery table like this one, except I've opened up the, I've added the property of the URLs just so I can kind of like go in here and click on it easily. So these are all like different websites that I found. Most of them are like Tumblr accounts, and they have images, or they have kind of like references to student projects and other kinds of projects unrelated to architecture, and they just, you know, you can kind of like scroll through them and I guess look through them and find inspiration on certain things. The next thing I'm going to be walking you through is my thesis page. So this is, again, has been tweaked throughout the year. Initially it actually just started off with this sort of side section, so I've split this part of the page into two columns. You've got a database on this side, and then you've just got a bit of text and some extra pages. Here, for example, is a database as its own page. So this is the timeline that we had to include in our research method statement, and I was easily able to do this in Notion. Many people used Excel and created kind of like their own like Gantt chart, but I found this method so much more easier. And then, as I mentioned, I've also got my key dates on here, which I'm ticking off as I go. So on this left-hand side, I've got my books and journals database. So this is a very key kind of like database, I think, in my whole Notion workspace, I suppose, just because I think this has helped me a lot to write notes, to read more, to pick out key references and things. And like I said before, it's literally just a database. This is a different kind of view. So this is a board view, and what I've done is separated it by type. So you've got books here, articles and journals, web pages, and stuff that's archived that I'm not really using anymore. And if you go into any one of these, like the Great Good Place is a good key reference. What I've done is added a call out box at the top, which is just kind of like a very simple summary, and this helps especially when you're presenting this to your tutors or to your peers, just to give them a like reference point on what this book actually is. Once you start adding headings as well, you can also create a table of contents automatically. So you can just go / table of contents, and it will create one for you depending on what kind of headings you have. And what I've done here is basically copied in like the text from the book itself, highlighted any of like the key phrases, added a divider, which is another kind of block, and then written down what page that was from, what kind of maybe like chapter, and then my own notes as kind of like bullet points. And this really helps because once I'm planning, which I'll show you later on, like certain sections of the thesis, and the main thing in this thesis page is my chapter tables. So this is actually how I'm planning my thesis. If you'd like to see a video on how I'm doing this, do let me know. It's quite complicated, but it just makes a lot of sense if I explain it properly. But this is, again, a simple table. You'll find that most of these things in these workspaces are actually just tables and databases, and pages within that. So that's pretty much my entire like academic workspace in Notion. If you would like to centralize everything into Notion, it may be worth downloading my Archi Student Dashboard Notion template, which sets you up with spaces for 4 modules, and you can basically start from there rather than creating each page from scratch. You definitely have to play around with it, use it for a couple of weeks to really understand which parts or databases you're regularly using and which aspects of the Notion page can be cut. So it's totally up to you. And this will again help you reach an efficient stage and give you momentum to start working and pick up where you left from. Let me know in the comments if there was anything I missed or anything you'd like me to create a video on, such as the essay planning matrix. I hope you all have a wonderful week. See you next time.